Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes. Today we're going deep, really deep, into economic analysis of law.
Yeah, this book, it's like a whole new way of looking at the legal system. Not about what law should be, but like how economics is baked into the system? It's applying ideas like, are people really rational? What does efficiency actually mean in law? And how do things like the cost of making a deal really affect the legal world? We're talking property, contracts, even criminal law and family stuff, all through this economic lens.
It's a huge undertaking. So where do we even begin with something this big?
Well, the book starts with the bedrock of economics, right? Like the idea that it's all about choices and we don't have unlimited resources. So people, they tend to act in a way that benefits them most, given what they know and what they can do. That's the rational actor part.
Rational actor. Makes it sound like everyone's walking around with calculators in their heads.
Right, right. But it's not about being a math whiz. It's more like everyone has a goal and they try to get there in a way that makes sense to them. It's a bit more, well, human.
So how does this rational actor idea play out in the legal system?
That's where this thing called opportunity cost comes in. Like every choice you make means you're giving up something else. Say you choose to go to law school. You're giving up the money you could have earned working, right? That's opportunity costs, and it's huge in legal decisions.
And doesn't this lead us to one of the most famous ideas from the book, the Coase theorem? I feel like I've heard that thrown around a lot.
Oh yeah, the Coase theorem. It basically says, imagine there's no cost to making deals, right? Zero friction, like no lawyer's fees, no time wasted arguing. In that world, it doesn't matter who starts with what legal right. They'll just bargain their way to the best result for both of them.
Okay, but give me an example. How does that work in real life?
Let's say there's a factory spewing pollution into a lake and it hurts the fishermen. Let's say the damage to the fishermen is like 100 grand a year. But the factory could clean it up for 80 grand. See where this is going.
If the fishermen have the right to a clean lake, they could force the factory to clean up, or take a payout somewhere between 80 and 100 grand. Either way, pollution's likely reduced because economically it makes more sense.
Exactly. Now flip it. If the factory has the right to pollute, the fishermen might pay them up to 100 grand to stop. Still less than the damage they'd suffer. So even with different starting points, they end up at the efficient solution, less pollution.
But like, in the real world, making deals isn't free. Right? There's always some cost, some headache involved.
Oh yeah, tons of headaches. And that's where the Coase theorem gets really interesting, because when those transaction costs are high, then who starts with the right, it matters a lot. Think about getting 100 homeowners to agree with that factory on a pollution payment. Ugh, nightmare.
Right, like herding cats. So the law can actually help things along by assigning those rights clearly from the get-go.
Absolutely. And then the book really dives deep into this idea of efficiency. Like, what does it even mean for the law to be efficient?
Well, I guess in the simplest terms, it means getting the most bang for your buck, right? Like using resources in a way that makes everyone better off overall.
Yeah, and better off isn't just about money. It's about everything people value, even stuff you can't put a price tag on, like a clean environment or, free time.
Right, right. But I feel like I've also heard critiques of just focusing on efficiency. Like, shouldn't law also care about fairness and, making sure everyone benefits, not just the folks with the most money?
For sure. The book definitely acknowledges that. It says, yeah, efficiency is important, but it's not the only thing. Like, sometimes the law might favor protecting certain groups, even if it's not the most efficient in a purely economic sense. Think about labor laws that protect workers, even if it means slightly higher costs for businesses.
So it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
Like trying to find that sweet spot where things are running smoothly but also fairly.
Exactly. And that balance plays out in all sorts of legal areas. Like, let's take property law, for example. What's the economic heart of property rights?
I guess it's about who gets to use what and who gets to say no to others using it, like having clear boundaries.
Yeah, you got it. It's about exclusivity. When your property rights are solid, you can invest in your land, make it better, knowing you'll reap the rewards. If things are uncertain, well, who's going to put in the effort, right?
Right. And the book uses this example of like a farmer and a hog to show what happens when property rights are fuzzy.
Oh yeah, classic example. Imagine this farmer raising his prized hog. Now, if his property rights are rock solid, he knows what that hog's worth, he can plan ahead. But what if there's this railroad nearby shooting sparks could kill the hog? Or what if the neighbor can sue him because the hog stinks? Suddenly the farmer's future is way less certain.
Makes sense. So clear property rights, they're like the foundation for a stable economy.
Totally. And then there's eminent domain, right? Like when the government can just take your land.
Yeah, that always seemed kind of harsh to me. Like, where's the fairness in that?
Well, the book looks at it from this angle. Imagine the government needs to build a highway, right? But every landowner along the way can hold out for a crazy price. Nothing gets done. So eminent domain, in theory, it helps overcome those roadblocks. But there's that just compensation thing, right? Like, how do you really put a price on someone losing their home? Tough questions.
Yeah, super tough. And then you've got those transaction costs popping up again. Like if making deals is a pain, it messes up the whole property game.
Exactly. Remember that pollution example. If the factory's messing up the air for a whole town, getting everyone to agree on a solution, forget it. Too much hassle.
So property rights are key, but they're only part of the story, right?
Mm.
What about contracts? How does economics play into those?
Contracts. They're the backbone of any functioning market. It's all about making promises you can rely on so people can plan ahead, take risks, and, get stuff done. One of the big ideas here is consideration, meaning there has to be something valuable exchanged, like a promise for a promise or money for goods. That makes it enforceable.
But I've heard of situations where promises are upheld even without that strict exchange. Like, what about those cases of, like, detrimental reliance?
Oh, yeah, that's where it gets tricky. Those are the cases where someone really relies on a promise, changes their whole situation, and then bam, the other person backs out. It would be really unfair to just let that slide. The law sees that as a kind of fiction to make things right.
So it's not always black and white, is it?
Not at all. There are all these situations where contracts might not be enforced. Like, what if someone's forced into a deal under duress, or if the terms are just crazy unfair?
Yeah, like those contracts with the tiny print you can barely read. Is there an economic angle to that?
Oh, for sure. Think about it. If a company has a monopoly, they can get away with burying all sorts of sneaky stuff in the fine print. It's a way to hide costs, make things less transparent, which isn't good for anyone in the long run.
Speaking of sneaky, what about when contracts go sour? How do we figure out damages? The book mentions this case, Groves v. John Wonder, that really highlights the complexities.
Ah, yes, Groves. That one was a doozy. It all boils down to whether you go with expectation damages, which is like putting the wronged party in the position they'd be in if the contract was kept, or reliance damages, which just covers their actual losses.
So, like, if I hire you to paint my house and you flake, should I get enough to hire someone else or just get my money back?
Exactly. And Groves shows it's not always simple. Like, if the cost of fulfilling the contract was way higher than the benefit, it might make more economic sense to just cut your losses.
Interesting. And the book also talks about why those penalty clauses in contracts, the ones that threaten huge fees if you break the deal, why those aren't usually enforced. What's the logic there?
Right. Penalty clauses. Think about it. They can actually make things worse sometimes. Like, what if breaking the contract and paying a smaller fee is actually the best outcome for everyone involved? Penalty clauses, they discourage that kind of flexibility.
Okay, I'm starting to see the pattern here. It's all about finding the solution that makes the most sense for the overall economy.
Exactly. And now for a real curveball, let's talk about family law.
Family law. That doesn't seem very economic.
You'd be surprised. The book argues that stuff like the rise of no-fault divorce, it makes a lot of sense economically. Back in the day, you needed to prove someone did something wrong to get divorced. Now it's a lot easier. And that might reflect how the benefits of staying married have changed over time.
I guess if it's more costly to stay together, an easier exit makes sense, right?
Right. And then there's the whole issue of dividing stuff up in a divorce, especially tricky when one spouse stayed home, raised kids, didn't earn a paycheck. How do you value that?
Yeah, like being a stay-at-home parent is work, but it's not easy to put a dollar amount on it.
Exactly. So the rules for dividing assets, they're kind of trying to recognize that unpaid work and the sacrifices made. It's about fairness, but it also has this economic logic underneath it.
Okay, let's move on to something a bit more, traumatic, torts, accidents, injuries, that sort of thing. What's the economic goal there?
Well, the main idea is to make accidents less costly for society as a whole. That means compensating victims, but also preventing those accidents in the first place. That's where this thing called the hand formula comes in.
The hand formula sounds intimidating.
No, it's not too bad. It basically says you're negligent if the cost of preventing an accident is less than the likelihood of it happening times how bad it'd be. Like, if a simple precaution could prevent a huge disaster, you're kind of in trouble if you didn't take it.
Got it. So, like, if I don't shovel my icy sidewalk and someone breaks a leg, I'm probably on the hook.
Probably, yeah. The book also talks about this custom thing, like what's the standard practice in an industry? Can that get you off the hook?
Interesting. So, like, if everyone in my industry does something a certain way, does that mean it's automatically okay?
Not always. The book says even if it's the norm, you got to look at the economics of it. If the risk is still too high, custom might not be enough to save you. It's got to be economically justifiable too.
Makes sense. And what about those different ways of assigning blame, like contributory versus comparative negligence?
Oh, yeah, those are interesting. Contributory negligence is like if you're even a little bit at fault, you get nothing. Comparative is more like we split the blame, you get some, but not all. But the book argues that both can actually push people to be more careful.
Huh. So even if you can still get something, even if you're partly to blame, you're still motivated to avoid the mess in the first place.
Exactly. People don't like losing money no matter how you slice it. And now let's get into criminal law.
Criminal law. Now we're talking, what's the economic angle there?
So unlike torts, which are often about accidents, criminal law is about like intentional bad stuff, things we want to discourage. And the way to do that economically is through punishment. The idea is make the cost of committing a crime higher than the potential benefit, and people will think twice.
So like higher fines, longer prison sentences, that sort of thing.
Yeah, those are the tools. But here's the thing. The book argues that there's a sweet spot for punishment. Too harsh, and you might discourage even harmless stuff just because people are scared of getting caught.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Right. Discourage the bad stuff, but not so much that it paralyzes people from doing anything.
Exactly. The book even talks about this idea of optimal criminal sanctions, like what's the right level of punishment to achieve that balance. It's not as simple as just locking everyone up and throwing away the key.
Makes you think. And after criminal law, the book jumps into antitrust and regulation, which seem like totally different beasts.
Yeah, but it's all connected. Like, antitrust is all about making sure markets are competitive, so no one company can jack up prices and take advantage of consumers. Monopolies are bad, competition is good, that's the gist.
I remember learning about monopolies in school, but didn't really connect it to, like, real-world law.
Oh, it's real world, all right. And the book dives into all the nitty-gritty, like, how do you even measure if a company has too much power? What counts as predatory pricing? It gets pretty complex.
I bet. And what about labor markets, like unions and stuff?
Yeah, the book looks at unions from both sides. On one hand, they can give workers more bargaining power, get them better wages and conditions. But on the other hand, they can sometimes lead to fewer jobs overall. It's a trade-off.
And how does the book handle this whole idea of government regulation? Like, when should the government step in and tell businesses what to do?
Well, the classic argument for regulation is when markets fail, like when there's a natural monopoly or when companies are polluting and not paying the full cost of their damage. But the book is really nuanced. It talks about the difficulties of designing good regulation, the risk of it being captured by special interests, and even the idea that sometimes regulation is just a product that powerful groups demand for their own benefit.
Wow. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, isn't it?
Ugh.
There's so much more going on beneath the surface of the law than we often realize.
Exactly. And that's what makes economic analysis of law so insightful. It's not about giving you all the answers, but giving you a new way to ask the questions.
So for our listeners out there, I'd love for you to take a moment and think about all the legal areas we've talked about today. Is there one where you now see the economic forces at play more clearly? What surprised you the most?
It's all about seeing those hidden incentives and costs and how they shape the legal landscape.
A huge thanks to you for joining us on this deep dive. If this piqued your interest, I highly encourage you to pick up Economic Analysis of Law and explore further. Until next time, happy reading, and we'll catch you on the next Books and Bytes.